What if the worst thing this person did to you was never really about you at all? Every insult, every lie, every cold silence, every cruel word that seemed designed to cut deep. It all served a purpose, but maybe not the purpose you first believed. Today, I want to pull back the curtain on a hard truth that sits underneath this kind of behavior. Why hurting you gives them something they feel they need. Why the pain felt so personal, even when it was not truly about your worth. And why seeing this clearly can change the way you heal from it. If you have ever asked yourself how someone who once sounded loving could suddenly become distant, sharp, dismissive, or openly cruel, stay with me, because the answer is not hiding in the words they said out loud. It is buried inside the part of them they could not face and often could not even admit to themselves. And if this helps you finally name something you have struggled to explain, keep listening, because what comes next is the part many people miss. One of the hardest truths after this kind of emotional harm is accepting that what they did was not proof that you were lacking. It felt personal because the attacks landed on your heart, your mind, your body, your hopes, your fears, and the soft places you trusted them with. After enough of that, it becomes easy to believe that if you had been more patient, more calm, more loving, more understanding, then maybe it would have stopped. But that belief keeps you looking in the wrong direction. Their behavior usually grows out of a shaky inner self that cannot hold up under stress, shame, fear, or loss of control. So instead of dealing with what hurts inside them, they push that pain outward. And the closest person becomes the easiest place to unload it. They often know exactly where to hit because they have spent time learning you. They notice what matters to you. They remember what scares you. They study what makes you feel safe, valued, and seen. Then, when they feel cornered, insecure, criticized, ignored, or exposed, they can use that same knowledge like a weapon. This is why the cruelty can feel so precise, so personal, so targeted that it almost seems impossible to believe it was not a true reading of who you are. But the deeper truth is that their behavior says far more about what they are trying to run from than it does about your value. And this is also why the same patterns often show up again and again with different people, different partners, different friends, different family members, different settings. The faces change, but the pattern remains because the source of the problem travels with them. Understanding that does not excuse what happened, it does not make it smaller, it does not erase the damage. But it does shift the focus away from that painful question, what is wrong with me, and toward a more honest one, what was this person trying so hard not to feel inside themselves? That shift matters. It matters because the moment you stop using their treatment of you as a measure of your worth, their twisted version of you starts losing its grip. And once that grip weakens, healing becomes possible in a way it never could when you were still trying to earn safety from the person who kept taking it away. In many cases, emotional pain is not just a side effect for them. It becomes a tool. Healthy relationships usually move through conflict with respect, honesty, repair, and some shared desire to protect emotional safety. But when someone sees relationships mainly through power, everything changes. The question stops being, how do we solve this together, and becomes, who is in control right now? That is where the silent treatment starts to make sense. The harsh criticism, the gaslighting, the broken promises, the sudden distance, the jealousy games, the public embarrassment, the loving tone one day and the icy stare the next. These actions do not just hurt, they destabilize. They pull your attention away from your own needs and force it toward getting back on steady ground with them. And while you are trying to understand what changed, how to fix it, what you said wrong, or how to avoid the next blow, your confidence slowly begins to shrink. You start replaying talks in your head. You apologize for things you did not do. You become careful with your words. You walk on eggshells. That shift is not accidental. The more unsure and drained you become, the easier it is for them to keep the upper hand. Even short moments of kindness after long stretches of pain can tighten the cycle. Suddenly, you feel relief, hope, maybe even gratitude for scraps of warmth that should have been normal all along. And that is where many people get trapped, because relief can start to feel like love when you have been starved long enough. Keep listening, because this next part explains why leaving can feel so much harder than outsiders understand. The mix of warmth and hurt keeps your nervous system off balance. You are not just attached to the person. You are attached to the hope of safety returning, and that hope can keep you emotionally tied long after the relationship has stopped being healthy. A lot of people think this behavior gets triggered only by criticism or rejection, but that is not the full picture. Your growth can trigger it too. Your calm can trigger it. Your healing can trigger it. Your independence can trigger it. When your whole emotional world seems to revolve around them, they often feel secure. If your mood rises and falls with their approval, if your choices keep bending around their preferences, if your confidence depends on their praise, they feel powerful and important. But the moment you begin standing more firmly in yourself, something changes. You set boundaries. You make your own decisions. You build routines that do not include their chaos. You invest in your work, your friends, your health, your peace. You start feeling full in places where they once kept you hungry. And instead of celebrating that, they may begin pushing against it. They may mock your goals, minimize your success, question your choices, or act strangely cold during moments that should be happy for you. Not because your growth is wrong, not because your joy is fake, but because your strength reminds them that they are losing the emotional control they once relied on. That loss can stir up deep fear inside them. Fear of being left behind, forgotten, made less important, or exposed as less powerful than they want to appear. So rather than face those feelings directly, they often try to drag you back into doubt. They bring up your old mistakes. They compare you to others. They pick at your confidence. They create conflict right when you are starting to feel clear. Sometimes it looks random, sometimes it looks petty, but the effect is the same. If they can make you question yourself again, there is a chance you will turn back toward them for reassurance, and the imbalance they know so well gets restored. That is why your growth can feel like a threat to someone who depends on keeping you emotionally small. Another confusing part is how often they accuse you of the very things they struggle with themselves. This can feel unreal when you are inside it. They lie, then call you dishonest. They act jealous, then accuse you of jealousy. They are controlling, then say you are trying to control them. They avoid responsibility, then tell you everything is your fault. It can feel so backwards that your mind keeps trying to make it make sense. But many times these accusations are less about facts and more about emotions they cannot tolerate in themselves. Deep underneath the confident surface, there may be fear, shame, weakness, envy, or a painful sense of not being enough. Instead of facing those feelings, they push them onto someone else. And once that happens, you become the one carrying labels that never really belong to you. This is one reason conversations with them can feel so circular and exhausting. You think you are discussing a real issue, but the talk keeps turning into defense. You try to explain, they twist it. You try again, they deny. You bring up something clear, they redirect. Before long, you are defending yourself against a picture of you that does not even match your actual behavior. And while you are busy proving you are not the monster they describe, their own behavior slips out of focus. That confusion is powerful. It keeps you in self-examination. While they avoid self-examination, it keeps you reacting while they keep redirecting. It keeps you off-center. If you have ever walked away from a conversation thinking, how did this become about me again? That is often why. Their words can sound like judgments of your character, but many times they reveal the emotional burden they are trying to escape. Knowing that will not erase the sting. It will not stop the hurt overnight, but it can help you stop swallowing accusations that were never a true reflection of who you are. And that matters, because the less you internalize their version of you, the easier it becomes to see the pattern instead of only feeling the wound. One of the most painful parts of this cycle is realizing that your reactions may have become something they depended on. That does not mean you caused any of it. It does not mean your tears were wrong, your anger was wrong, or your confusion was weakness. Any person who is repeatedly criticized, ignored, manipulated, or emotionally neglected will react. That is human. But where a healthy person might see your distress and feel concern, this kind of person may read your reaction very differently. Your pain can become proof that they still have impact. Your sadness can become proof that they still matter. Your anger can become proof that they still control the room. In that way, even negative attention can feed the very dynamic that keeps the cycle going. That is why some of them keep pushing long after the original issue should be over. They repeat the hurtful comment. They deny what was obvious. They bring up old pain. They press the exact button they know will get a reaction. Not because they want understanding, but because they want evidence that they still live at the center of your emotional world. And once you see that, a lot of past arguments start to look different. You were trying to fix it. They were trying to keep the charge alive. You were trying to be heard. They were trying to feel powerful. You were hoping honesty would lead to repair. They were often using the conversation itself as fuel. This is why explaining more, pleading more, defending more, and trying harder to make them understand usually changes very little in the long run. The interaction itself may be giving them what they want. So breaking the pattern is not about pretending you are not hurt. It is not about shutting off your heart. It is about slowly taking your emotional energy back and refusing to keep offering it to someone who uses your vulnerability as proof of their importance. That redirection is difficult, but it is also the beginning of freedom. At the start, this kind of relationship can feel almost magical. They seem deeply interested in you. They notice little details. They mirror your values. They praise your strengths. They speak in a way that makes you feel chosen, understood, and deeply seen. It can feel like rare connection, like finally meeting someone who gets you without effort. And because that stage feels so warm, so affirming, so emotionally rich, the later shift can become even more confusing. But often, that early idealizing energy is not built on truly seeing you as a whole person. It is built on what your attention, admiration, and emotional investment give to them. As long as you reflect back the image they want, things may feel almost perfect. Then reality enters. You disagree, you set a limit, you need care too. You stop praising them all the time. You become more human than ideal. And suddenly the tone changes. The compliments fade, the patience thins, the warmth cools. The same qualities they once admired can start getting criticized. Your independence becomes selfishness. Your kindness becomes weakness. Your sensitivity becomes a problem. Your needs become too much. This sharp reversal can leave you trying desperately to get back to the version of them you met in the beginning. You replay the good days. You blame yourself for the change. You think maybe if you can just fix your tone, your timing, your reactions, the loving person will come back and stay. But what many people slowly realize is that the early image was never the whole truth. It was the easiest version for them to maintain while you were giving them what they needed. Once normal human limits appeared, they struggled to hold a balanced view of you. Instead of seeing a real person with strengths and flaws, they swung between extremes. Wonderful one moment, disappointing the next. That emotional swing is not love growing deeper. It is instability showing itself. At the same time, many of these people work very hard to protect a polished public image. Outside the relationship, they may look charming, generous, successful, thoughtful, funny, even deeply caring. Friends may admire them, coworkers may respect them, family may defend them, strangers may never see anything unusual at all. And that gap between the public image and the private reality can become one of the most isolating parts of the experience for the person closest to them. Because you are living with contradictions other people do not witness. You see the coldness after the charm, the blame after the smile, the cruelty behind closed doors, the version that appears only when no audience is left to impress. That is why becoming aware of the gap can make you feel threatening to them. It is not only that you know their flaws, it is that you have seen behind the performance. You have watched the mask slip. You have noticed how carefully the story gets managed. And once they sense that you no longer fully believe the image, they may intensify efforts to protect it. They may say you misunderstood. They may paint you as unstable, dramatic, too sensitive, or hard to please. They may quietly damage your credibility before you ever speak openly. In some situations, they may separate you from people who might compare notes and start seeing the same pattern. The fear underneath all of this is not just being judged by others. It is being forced to face parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. So preserving the image becomes more important than honesty, more important than repair, more important than emotional closeness. And the closer you get to the truth, the more likely you are to meet defensiveness, denial, anger, or a rewritten version of events. Stay with me, because this last part is the one that starts to give your power back. The biggest truth to hold on to is this: their wish to hurt you was never proof that you were weak, unlovable, foolish, or not enough. It was proof that they could not handle their own inner reality in a healthy way. Every attempt to control you, shrink you, confuse you, or push you into self-doubt revealed something about their fear, not your worth. The more clearly you understand these patterns, the less power they have to shape your identity. Clarity begins replacing confusion. Self-compassion begins replacing self-blame. Confidence begins returning where fear once lived. Healing starts the moment you stop asking why you were not enough for them and start seeing that no amount of love, sacrifice, patience, or perfection could have filled a void they refused to face inside themselves. That was never your job, and it was never a job you could have completed. Your real victory is not making them feel sorry. It is not getting the perfect apology. It is not finally winning an argument they were never having in good faith. Your victory is quieter than that, but far more powerful. It is trusting your own judgment again. It is choosing peace over chaos. It is setting boundaries without explaining them for hours. It is building a life that no longer rises and falls on their approval. It is waking up one day and noticing that their voice in your head is not the loudest one anymore. It is knowing what happened without turning it into a sentence against yourself. And when you live from that place, something changes that they never expected. The person they once thought they could keep emotionally trapped begins to move beyond their reach. Not with revenge, not with drama, but with truth, steadiness, and a life that no longer bends around manipulation. That is the response they cannot control. That is the freedom they never planned for. And that is where your future begins.